What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. A few years ago back in 2012 and 2013, Riot released a replay system to the public beta environment for testing, with the promise of replays being released in the near future. Replays are an important thing for players to have, because they help you review your games and improve as a player, which also makes them important for the competitive aspect of the game, and as well, they help people with content creation too. However, eventually the replay tab was removed from the PBE without much word on the subject, and we haven't seen a new version pushed to testing at any point since then. Although Riot promised replays several times, we've never received a time frame, and taking this into account, along with a few other factors, we can say that it's quite likely that Riot will never release replays. Let's get started. Now I want to start off the video by saying that this doesn't mean that replays are absolutely 100% for sure never going to come out. And personally, I would really want to see them come out. I'm for this happening. It's just that it's probably not going to be the case. And based on a lot of information that we're going to get into, it's just quite likely that they'll never be released. And even if they do, I wouldn't expect to see them for at least a few more years. And this is due to a number of factors. First off, when replays were on the PBE back in 2012, the replay system proved to have a few problems that Riot mostly kept quiet, as they faded replays out of existence and hoped that they would just become forgotten, which they have been for the most part. However, during that time on the PBE, it was discovered that Riot needed to store the replays on the server side of the game, rather than on the client side of the game, meaning that instead of being able to save replays to your PC, they would just have to be stored in Riot's servers. One reason why this could be is because if the replays were saved to the client side of the game, it could open up an extreme amount of exploits to the point where the game would become almost unplayable. Remember that one time someone used an exploit to make their summoner spells have no cooldown, or the time someone using an exploit involving Ashe to summon infinite Azir turrets? Well, according to Riot, that's essentially what could be happening left and right if replays were stored on the client side. And that sounds kind of crazy to be honest, but the reason why it is, or at least the reason why Riot said it is that storing replays on the client side would open up access to a lot of information about the framework of the game that people could use to find and create exploits that isn't otherwise available in third-party programs or anywhere else really. Now I'm not sure how true that actually is, but it's just what Riot said about it, so I guess we just have to assume it's true, although they could have some other reasoning behind it. As well, with replays being forced into saving on the server side, the reality is that right now, the servers just aren't good enough to handle that. Riot has recently improved the servers a lot actually, especially in North America, when they moved the main server to the Midwest, but for the most part, their server plans are actually complete. And if you take a look at their page about the North America roadmap for the server plans that they had, moving the server to the Midwest was the final step. With League of Legends having such an insane player base, implementing replays on the server side right now would likely bring us constant disconnects and make the game unplayable from time to time, because the servers just straight up can't handle it. And you do really have to take into account that with such a large player base, the amount of space that the replays would take up on those servers is just insane. The time that replays spent on the PBE proved that Riot does have a working replay system developed. So it's definitely not a question of if they have it available, but whether or not it's practical or possible to implement. And having to put a lot of additional work into the servers for replays is a monumental effort that Riot just sees as not being worth it. The second thing is that Riot is honestly completely satisfied with the third-party current replay programs that already exist. There's plenty of working systems. You got Skin Spotlights replays, LSI replays, Replay.gg, Baron replays, and all these other programs. And although some of them have problems that a Riot replay system otherwise wouldn't have, Riot does see those options as being good enough for pretty much everyone. The replay systems have been improving drastically over the years, and it's not like Riot isn't making an effort to make sure that a replay program is available. Replays became much easier to code when Riot released their API a while back. And I know personally they work a lot with Declan, the guy who makes Skin Spotlights replays. Shout out to that guy, he's a boss. He also makes the camera tool that Riot uses in their LCS production, and they help him out a lot. Riot has been making a great effort to make sure that a working replay program does exist. And they found that the third-party replay software like Skin Spotlight replays is not only good enough, but actually quite satisfactory. This is probably the biggest reason why they don't really care about making replays, because it means that in Riot's eyes, them developing their own replay system just isn't necessary, and as such they just don't treat it as a high priority, since the reality is that it's not that necessary with those programs available. Sure, the Riot released replay system would be superior to those programs, but honestly not by much, and because of that, it's not worth the monumental effort to create the server system necessary for Riot released replays to exist. And to be honest, you can't really blame them. The third-party replay programs that exist are pretty damn good, and they've been good for years, especially ever since they released their API back in the day. And I think that's really the biggest thing to consider. You know, how much more would the players actually benefit from a Riot released replay system over using one of the third-party replay programs? The amount of the player base that legitimately benefits from the improvements a Riot released replay system is honestly just minuscule. The only benefit a Riot released replay system would bring over a third-party replay system is just having something that's maybe a little bit more reliable and less buggy compared to the third-party replay programs, and having it be, I guess, a bit more intuitive to use since it's already in the game, rather than having to know about and then go install a program online. And the amount of people that would actually benefit from those improvements over a third-party system is just so minute, because honestly, if people want replays, they can just go install a third-party program. And that group that would benefit from the Riot system is nowhere near a group big enough for Riot to care and devote resources to. An average casual player can use the third-party replay programs perfectly fine if they want replays. The only problem is that it's maybe a little bit unintuitive since they have to go find the programs online, install them and all that stuff, but any competitive player that would legitimately get use out of the replays is more aware than enough to go find that information for themselves. And that benefit is nowhere near enough compared to the cost of making replays in the first place for Riot to care. And I mean, can you really blame them? As a player, I would rather that they dedicate their resources to other problems that the game has. There's so many things that the game needs that are just more important and would be way more impactful than adding in replays, like improving the new player experience, improving the game itself, fixing bugs, and making new content. Now with that said, it doesn't mean that they aren't working on replays at all. They're probably working on their servers all the time. It's just that the current servers are so drastically far off from what the servers need to be for replays to exist. And it's certainly not impossible for Riot to release replays in the future, but for that to be true, one of maybe a few things needs to happen. It could potentially become a priority for them for whatever reason. Right now, it's definitely not a priority, and Riot doesn't really have the incentive to make it one, but in the future, they might. If they somehow do get incentive to make replays, I'm sure they would probably find a way to make it happen. It's just that right now, it's not necessary in their eyes, and it's nowhere near worth it. It's also possible that the game eventually gets to the point where not that much else really needs that much improvement, and they start to work on replays because there's nothing better to do, but let's be realistic, that's not going to happen. They could also maybe find a way to make client-side replays possible. Right now, the third-party replay programs do save on the client side for the most part, at least some of them do. And it works fine, because Riot is able to withhold information from those replays to make it so the exploits aren't possible, but they have said that releasing replays from the client side would open up a lot of problems. But maybe they find a workaround in the future for that. Although I have to admit, based on the way they've talked about it, it's not likely for this to happen. Although it does seem a little bit weird, I guess. It's just, I don't know, I don't really know what to say because we're probably not getting the full story on that reasoning. But that's just what Riot has said. Something could also potentially happen to the third-party replay programs so that they no longer run properly. I don't know, maybe something changes in the game that ruins replays for the third-party software, or maybe something happens with the people and the companies making the software, who knows. But again, that's extremely unlikely. Also, I do want to add in here at the end, since it is a concern some of you have brought up in the comments in the past, Riot doesn't pay me anything to make these videos, and they've never paid me anything in the past either. And if they did pay me for a video, it would be really obvious to tell, and I would make it completely clear and obvious, just like I do with all of my sponsors. And with all that said, I also want to make it clear again that it's not impossible that Riot releases replays in the future. It's just extremely unlikely, and something very meaningful has to change to make them actually care about releasing replays, because right now, they just don't. And I don't really blame them at all. I don't think there's anything wrong with their stance on replays. It's just kind of a bummer, I guess, because I really do want to see them come out. And that's just about it. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you didn't, hit that dislike. Subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.